He looked me dead in the eye, spat on the ground near my boot, and said, "I make more in a week than you make in a year, so get off my property before I buy yours just to evict you." That was the moment I knew that simply winning wasn't going to be enough. I had to absolutely ruin him. Before we dive into how I legally destroyed the most entitled neighbor on earth, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We share stories like this every week, and you don't want to miss the next one. It all started about 3 years ago. I live in a semi-rural area, the kind of place where you move specifically because you don't want to see your neighbors. I have about 5 acres of land, mostly wooded, with a small creek running through the back. It was paradise. My property is an odd shape, shaped almost like a flag, with a long, thin driveway acting as the pole, leading back to the main square of land where my house sits. For 10 years, the property next to me was empty. It was owned by an elderly couple who lived in Florida and never visited. But then they passed away, and the land was sold to a developer who split it into 2 massive lots. That is when he moved in. Let's call him Sterling. Sterling was the human equivalent of a luxury car parked across 3 handicap spots. He was a speculative real estate investor, or so he claimed. He built a McMansion right next to my property line. I'm talking about a house with columns that looked like they belonged in Rome, not in a wooded area in the Pacific Northwest. The trouble began immediately. Sterling didn't understand the concept of property lines. He seemed to believe that if he could see it, he owned it. It started small. I'd come home from work and find his landscaping crew dumping grass clippings and branches on my side of the tree line. When I walked over to ask them to stop, Sterling came storming out of his garage. He was a short man, always wearing a Bluetooth earpiece, always looking like he was in the middle of a very important panic attack. He told me, vaguely, that he was improving the value of the neighborhood and that I should be thanking him for handling the mulch. I tried to be neighborly. I explained that the pile was blocking a drainage ditch and would cause flooding if it rained. He laughed. He literally laughed in my face and told me that water flows where gravity takes it, and I should take a physics class. I kept my mouth shut. I'm a patient man. I work in civil engineering, specifically in municipal zoning and land surveying. Keep that in mind, because Sterling certainly didn't. He saw a guy driving a 10-year-old truck and wearing flannel and assumed I was a nobody. Things escalated in the spring. I came home one Tuesday to the sound of heavy machinery. I ran to the back of my lot. A bulldozer was tearing up the earth about 20 feet onto my property. They were clearing trees. My trees. 50-year-old oaks that provided shade and privacy. I was seeing red. I ran up to the operator and waved him down. He stopped, looking confused. I demanded to know what he was doing. He pointed to Sterling, who was standing on his patio, sipping something from a wine glass, watching the destruction like an emperor watching a gladiator match. I marched over to the property line. I didn't cross it, because unlike him, I respect boundaries. I shouted that he was trespassing and destroying my timber. Sterling didn't even come down to the fence. He just shouted back that he was building a detached 4-car garage and a pool house, and he needed the clearance. He said, and I quote, "The survey was wrong, and I own 10 feet past those trees." I told him he was out of his mind. I told him I had the original plat maps in my safe. He smirked and gave me the line about buying my property just to evict me. That was the line that sealed his fate. He thought money was the ultimate power. He didn't realize that in the world of real estate, the ultimate power is paperwork. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I just nodded, turned around, and went inside. I made a phone call to a buddy of mine who runs a licensed surveying company. I told him I needed a full, stake-in-the-ground survey done immediately. I wanted every inch marked with neon orange flags. While that was happening, Sterling continued construction. He poured a concrete slab. A massive one. It extended well over the property line. He built the frame of his garage. He even started digging the hole for his pool. He was moving fast, probably assuming that if he finished it before I could sue, he'd just pay a fine and keep the structure. That's how guys like Sterling operate. They think forgiveness is cheaper than permission. The survey was completed 3 days later. It confirmed what I already knew. Sterling's new garage was 12 feet onto my land. His pool deck was 5 feet over. But here is the kicker, and this is where my background in zoning comes in. In our county, there is a mandatory 25-foot setback from any property line for permanent structures. Even if he had built it on his side of the line, he was way too close. He had built a massive, permanent structure essentially in the setback zone, and partially on my land. But I didn't want to just stop him. I wanted to hurt him. I wanted to make sure he felt the financial pain of his arrogance. So I waited. I watched from my kitchen window as he paid contractors overtime to frame the roof. I watched as he installed expensive, custom-ordered carriage doors. I watched as he landscaped around it with imported shrubs. I waited until the structure was 100% complete. The day he finished, he threw a party. I could hear the music blasting. He had people over, showing off his new estate. That was the day I made my move. I didn't go to him. I went to the county courthouse. I filed a formal complaint regarding a severe encroachment and zoning violation. Because I work in the industry, I knew exactly which forms to file to trigger an immediate inspection. I also attached a copy of the certified survey and a cease and desist letter that I had drafted myself, citing the specific statutes he was violating. 2 days later, the county inspector arrived. Now, usually, inspectors are overworked and slow. But when you report a structure that is physically built on someone else's land without a permit, they move fast. It's a liability nightmare for the county. I stood on my porch with a cup of coffee. The inspector, a stern woman named Brenda who takes zero nonsense, walked onto Sterling's property. Sterling came out, all smiles, probably thinking she was there to admire his work. I couldn't hear the first part of the conversation, but I saw Sterling's body language change. He went from confident peacock to confused chicken. He started pointing at me. Brenda shook her head. She pulled out a measuring tape. She walked to the bright orange survey stakes my buddy had placed. She walked back to the garage. She slapped a bright red sticker on the brand new mahogany doors. It was a stop work order, combined with a condemnation notice. Sterling lost it. He started screaming. He was flailing his arms. Brenda just calmly wrote on her clipboard, handed him a citation, and walked away. The next day, I received a letter from Sterling's lawyer. It was threatening, of course. It claimed adverse possession, which was laughable since he'd been there 6 months, and demanded I sell him the strip of land for a fair market price to resolve the dispute. The offer was insulting. He offered me $2,000 for land he had built a $100,000 garage on. I responded with a lawyer of my own. My response was simple: I am not selling. Remove the encroachment immediately, or I will have it removed at your expense. Sterling tried to fight it. He went to the zoning board to ask for a variance. A variance is basically asking the city for permission to break the rules because of a hardship. I attended the public hearing. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up and presented the photos of him destroying my trees, the police report from when I reported the trespassing, and the video of him telling me he'd buy my house to evict me. I looked at the board and said, the only hardship here is that my neighbor believes he is above the law because of his bank account. Granting this variance would reward theft. The board voted unanimously. Variance denied. He was ordered to demolish the structure within 30 days. But wait, it gets better. Remember those trees he cut down? In many states, tree law is a very serious thing. Since he cut down mature oak trees on property that wasn't his, he was liable for treble damages. That means triple the value of the trees. Mature oaks are expensive to replace. We aren't talking about saplings. We are talking about 50-year-old giants. An arborist valued the trees at $20,000. Triple that, and he owed me $60,000 just for the wood. Sterling delayed the demolition. He thought he could stall. Day 29 came and went. On day 31, the county intervened. They hired a demolition crew. I sat on a lawn chair in my backyard with a cooler of iced tea. It was a beautiful Tuesday morning. A crew arrived with excavators. Sterling came running out of his house in his bathrobe, screaming into his phone. He tried to block the driveway with his luxury SUV. The police arrived and told him to move the car or get towed. He moved the car. I watched as the claw of the excavator ripped through the roof of his brand-new garage. I watched as the concrete slab he poured over my property line was jackhammered into dust. The noise was terrible, but to me, it sounded like a symphony. The best part? Because the county had to hire the crew, they charged Sterling premium emergency rates. And because the demolition damaged his pool plumbing, which he had also installed illegally without a proper inspection, his pool drained into the foundation of his main house, causing water damage to his basement. In the end, Sterling had to pay for the construction of the garage, the demolition of the garage, the fines for unpermitted work, the $60,000 for my trees, and the repair of his own flooded basement. All in, it cost him well over $200,000. He put the house on the market 3 months later. He couldn't afford the repairs and the legal fees. He moved out quietly in the middle of the night. The new neighbors are a nice young couple who asked me specifically where the property line was before they even planted a flower bed. I still have the check Sterling wrote me for the trees. I used it to build a very nice, very tall privacy fence exactly 6 inches inside my property line. Every time I look at it, I smile. If you enjoyed seeing an entitled millionaire get absolutely wrecked by zoning laws, hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of justice served cold. See you in the next one.